despite all of the advancements of mankind, we tend to think we're pretty strong. I mean, we've got all kinds of things that improve our health, that improve our comfort, to improve our world, our society, but we're really not as strong as we think we are because we still deal with weaknesses. We still deal with things that make us see that we are not our own gods, all-powerful, and can do anything we want to do. Do you ever feel like sometimes that heaven and hell are just a few inches apart from each other as we go through our lives? It seems like the successes seem to be followed by the failures, which are followed again by successes and failures, and life kind of goes that way for at least most of us. We believe the words of Jesus that said that if you just have a little seed of faith, you could do what? Move mountains. And sometimes we believe that, and we are just moving forward confidently, but other times we feel like our lives are like a hill on a fault line, and that earth is shaking underneath us, and we feel like we're just toppling to the ground because we just can't handle it. We just can't go on anymore. Weakness comes in all shapes and sizes. If we walked into a store that sold weaknesses, I'm sure we could find a lot of things on the shelf that fit us very well. And you could probably think through a few things in your own life that you feel are your weaknesses. Some of the weaknesses are physical. Our health is very fragile. The whole aging process is a sign of weakness. The fact that we just get tired day after day, by the end of the day or the middle of the day or by mid-morning. Some of our weaknesses are mental. We forget things. We worry about things. We get paralyzed by really tough decisions. Some of our weaknesses are emotional. You ever feel like somebody's hurt you so badly that you just feel like you just have been injured and wounded and you'll never heal from that? You ever feel lonely? You ever feel insecure or feeling like you don't have what it takes to be the person that you want to be? Some of our weaknesses are relational. Not being able to love somebody as perfectly as we want to love them, or not being loved by others as perfectly as we want them to love us, and feeling the pain that comes from that. The interpersonal conflict that never seems to get resolved or repeats itself over and over again. Some weaknesses are spiritual. It's that same old temptation that comes knocking on our door, or finding it hard to trust in God in difficult situations, or just wanting life to have more purpose to it and feel like, well, I'm just an ordinary person. What can God really do with my life? You know, we struggle with these things. All these things are different weaknesses, and we could stand here all day and name hundreds of others as we go along. And as we look at this sermon, you can think of any weaknesses you want to think of. There's a million of them out there to choose from. And just to realize that perfection is not the goal. None of us will ever be perfect. And that's not the goal, is to be perfect. We always want to improve. We want to be able to handle our weaknesses in a mature way. And that's kind of what separates the men from the boys, isn't it? How we handle our weaknesses. Most of our weaknesses might improve a little bit, but most of our weaknesses are kind of stuck with us, and we're going to face new ones as we go on through life. And what matters mostly is how we deal with the weaknesses, and not just giving into them and letting them pull us down and becoming people that we wouldn't ever want to be or other people don't like to see in us. So where do we go for strength? There was a psalm that was written, number 62, by a man who talked about what it was like to fluctuate. They feel strong one moment and weak the next. Strong the next moment, weak the next. And it's something we can relate to, because I think that's something that we all struggle with. People say, why can't I be more consistent in my relationship with God? Why can't it always be up here? Why does it keep going down here again? You know, you try to get it back up and it goes up and down, and that seems to be a normal experience. And the author of this psalm, who was David, a man after God's own heart, he wrote about this up and down struggle of what it is to feel strong one moment and to feel weak the next. And hopefully this can be a psalm that reminds us of our humanity, but also God's divinity and who God is, and keep coming back to God. And if our life just keeps going kind of up and down, you know, that's normal, that's okay. But when we're down, how do we respond? That's what we want to get at today. How do we deal with life when we feel weak and when we feel like we can't do it. So that's what we're going to look at today in this psalm, the ups and downs of life. And so let's take a look at this. And the whole psalm kind of goes back and forth. There'll be a couple verses that talk about the strength, a couple verses that talk about the weakness. Strength and weakness, and strength and weakness. So we're going to break this down and look at it that way. Okay? So the first two verses start out here in a strength mode. David says, "Truly, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken." I mean, it sounds like a pretty strong faith in God. Nothing's going to shake me. You know, and we have those kind of prayers. God, I'm with you all the way. No matter what happens, I'm going to stand strong. But then a moment of weakness comes in the next verses here. "How long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down in this leaning wall, this tottering fence? Surely they intend to topple me from my lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they curse." This person all of a sudden feels the taunts, the ridicule of other people, and they feel like they can't stand anymore. They feel like this leaning wall, a tottering fence. You know, they feel like the words that are coming at them from other people is bringing them down. And all of a sudden, the person that said, "God's my fortress, my rock, nothing will ever shake me," all of a sudden they're feeling shaken by the words that are coming at them like arrows, like darts. So David goes back to a strength mode again. He says, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, ye people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge." Kind of mimics the first few verses we read. Again, God is a rock. God is a strong place to stand. If you're going to build a house, you don't build it on the sand. You build it on a foundation. We put rocks down so that we can build that house upon that strong foundation. And this David here is saying, I could trust him at all times because God is my refuge. He's a safe place. If the enemy's coming to you, you don't want to be in a straw hut. You want to be in a mighty fortress. And that's the way David feels here. But then he goes back to weakness again. Verse 9, "Surely the lowborn are but a breath, the highborn are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they're nothing. Together they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them." He talks about it doesn't matter if you're born low or born high in the society. Life is but a breath. That's all that separates us from life to death is our breath. It comes and it goes very easily. On a balance, on a scale, what is breath? It doesn't weigh anything. And our lives are kind of like that. This person's feeling weak. They're feeling like unworthy. They're feeling like my life is worth nothing. It's just a fleeting thing. It's like I was just born and now I'm facing death. Life just goes so quickly. And David is feeling weak again. And he says, don't trust in things like stealing. Don't trust in dishonest ways and being jealous and coveting things that increase your wealth. He's saying all these things that we chase after in life, they really don't mean anything. And I'm feeling weak again because there are people who chase after these things, but it doesn't give them what they really need in life, what makes them feel strong. Riches, power, being able to use other people, all these things make a person feel like they might be strong, but in fact, it makes them weak. And the psalm ends in the next verses here. He says, one thing God has spoken, two things I have heard. Power belongs to you, God, and with you, Lord, is unfailing love. And you reward everyone according to what they have done. The psalm ends on a positive note here, talking about, it's interesting, God speaks one thing, but we hear it as two things. Do you think sometimes that maybe our communication level that God is on and what we're on are sometimes on different planes? The way God speaks and the way we listen can be different. God speaks one thing, but we hear it in two things. I think that's really just very interesting to me, the way the psalmist writes this here. He talks about God's power, and he talks about God's love. And a lot of times those things are opposites. Power and love can seem like two very opposite things. But yet, God is strong. He's all perfectly strong, and he's all perfectly loving. He's perfect in both of those ways. He has perfect power, not a power that abuses, not a power that lords over people and puts them down, but he has a power that truly is strong. And he has a love that is perfect as well. If you have strength but no love, then it's just an abusive domination. If you have love without strength, then it's just kind of a fickle sentimentality. Because love can be a nice fancy feeling, but if there's no strength behind it, and it fleets, and it's fleeting, and passes away, then it's not truly love. And so this tells us that God has these two qualities, his power, his strength, and his love that come together in a perfect way. And as a result, it says that God is going to give everyone according to what he has done. There's justice. There's a perfect justice out there. Have you ever been the victim of something that's unjust? It just wasn't fair. Somebody else got promoted, you didn't. Somebody else got a raise, you didn't. Your brother or sister got more for Christmas than what you got or something. There are a lot of things in life that don't seem fair. The last piece of cake got eaten up by somebody else, okay? We struggle with things being unfair, but in God's power and strength and in his love, it perfectly comes together, and everything's going to be fair by the end of the story, and we can trust in that. There's just this perfect mixture of both. I'd like to take a little, little advertisement time here to talk about what it's like to blend two things together perfectly here, and some of you that are at least as old as I am may remember this here. Oh, wait a minute, the sound's down. Sorry, I don't know. Can you go back?
You got peanut butter on my chocolate.
I know what's going on.
Well, you got chocolate in my peanut butter.
Bravissimo.
Two great tastes that taste great together. Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. Real milk chocolate. Good old-fashioned peanut butter.
Reese's Peanut Butter Cup.
Okay, you remember those days? Okay. Think about it. God's strength and God's love comes together like a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. One without the other is just not what it needs to be. But together it makes something even better than what we got there. And that's what God is. He's perfectly strong and he's perfectly loving. But if that's the case, okay, it's easy for us to sit here in church and say, God is perfectly strong and God is perfectly loving. And we sit there and nod our heads, and people are smiling as I talk about that, so I know that that's something that you accept. That's in our strong moment. But what about when the weak moments come? When we say, God, if you're so strong and powerful, then why don't you stop this? Why don't you do something about this situation that I'm praying to you about? Why are these things happening in the world? That's a weak moment. Or like, God, where are you in those moments? And we ask those questions. And God, if you are so loving the way that we say that you are, then why not this? Why not show your love through that? And we struggle with that as well in those weak moments. Okay, I'm not alone in that, right? You ask those questions too. God, if you're so strong, come on, move your mighty muscle, okay? Do this. And God, if you're so loving, show us right now, because we really need some love in our lives, because this is really stinking right now. Those are two questions that never go away about God being strong and loving. And in this psalm, we declared that. But in those weak moments, we tend to doubt that, or we misunderstand that. And you know what? If we were going to really tackle those two questions, you would not leave here today. We would be here all day and probably all week long trying to get to the bottom of it. Okay? It's a profound mystery And I'm not going to keep you all day, don't worry. We'll end at the normal time. But how do we deal with that? And we're just going to, I'm just going to take you just look at it from one angle here today. There's a million different angles you could look at it from, but we will try to look at that. But think about it. God's greatness, his strength, and his love exist, or let's put it this way, they coexist in a world that's full of evil. You have God over here with his strength and love, but we have a world that's full of evil. And we're part of that world of evil. I mean, we contributed to it to some extent because of our own sinfulness. And so we've got this world over here that's counter to who God is. Being in this world over here doesn't negate who God is. It doesn't negate the fact or weaken God or make him less powerful or less loving. It's just God has to show his strength and his love in a setting that is not conducive to that. Would you agree with me that kind of makes sense? That God actually has a pretty tough job here, okay? He's all powerful and he's all loving, but he has to do it in a context of the sinful world that you and I live in. Perhaps in some sort of way that's beyond our human understanding, God has to wrestle with these questions even more than we do. If he wanted to, he surely is able and capable to snap his finger and let that perfect strength and love be shown consistently and constantly everywhere at all times. He could do that. He could fix everything just like that over and over again. He's capable of doing that, but he has to choose when and where and how to exert the strength of his love and the love of his strength within the context that we live in. And there are some times that he jumps in and he intervenes and he shows it perfectly in certain situations. And there are other times that he pulls back. Not because he's not powerful or not loving, but there's a certain sense of a plan that's beyond what we understand. And in the midst of us feeling weak and feeling like God's love or his strength is not there to the extent that we know it's possible to be, then what happens is on our side is that our faith grows. If God just rescued us every single second, it would be so easy to have faith and trust in him. But faith is something that takes work. Faith is something that God uses, or through these things that when he pulls back, that he uses to strengthen our faith to him. And it's not some cruel lesson that God's giving to us, but being that he can't just come through and fix everything just like that, he at least uses his withholding of his strength and the showing of what we would say is his love to be able to help us to grow and to be dependent on him and to see him as a rock even when all around us is quicksand. And I know that sounds empty in a way, but coming from what angle? It is true. That's who God is. And he has to make those hard decisions and ask those hard questions even more than we do. We don't know every detail of God's plan. And we know that even if things don't get fixed the way we want them to, God is fixing something else in a different way. And what he's fixing is our hearts that lack faith. Our hearts that lack faith, to be able to trust him even when we feel like we're in the desert, even when we feel like we're at our weakest point. Why is this person healed and this person's not? We don't know why. Why does a war take part in this part of the world, another part of the world has perfect peace? Why are your sons and daughters free where there's others that are taken into slavery in other parts of the world? We don't know. We don't understand. We don't see the big picture. But just as this psalm reminds us, in the end, God is going to make things right. The reward will be given where it needs to be given. It'll be taken away where it needs to be taken away. And there will come a time when God's love and strength are going to be shown in a perfect way at the end of the world. And that's probably a day we don't really want to live to see, because God's righteous strength and love can be a very terrible thing for those who did not walk in faith. but a beautiful thing for those who do walk in faith. I wish there was an easier answer, but I haven't come up with one yet, but at least that's one way to try to look at it. That we don't see the big picture, and God is doing something bigger than even what we can see. God's love is strength, and God's strength is love. The two are combined together perfectly and intertwined, just like our chocolate and peanut butter is in our favorite little candy. Let's stop and pray.